Tell us more about the refugee team. I'm joined by the mission chief of that team, wheelchair tennis player Nyasha Mharakurwa. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Now, Zakia's victory, I know, was historic for the team. Can you talk about what it represented for Paralympic refugees?
Zakia's victory is a huge milestone. As you mentioned, it's the first ever medal for the team since 2016, when the International Paralympic Committee first fielded a refugee Paralympic team at the Games. So this is really big for us, and it puts us on the limelight and be able to showcase that these athletes are deserving to be here. It is just the circumstances that they find themselves in that would make it impossible if it wasn't for this opportunity. So this is really something good.
And you yourself are a Paralympian. I believe you competed in London for Zimbabwe in 2012. You play wheelchair tennis. Can you talk about your story and how you got into the sport?
Yeah, well, it's a long story, but in short, I played the sport since about 2001 in Zimbabwe, and ultimately I competed in London at the Games. But unfortunately, I had to retire a few months later due to injury. So I've had the opportunity to be working for the International Paralympic Committee the last few years, and which resulted in me having this honor of being named the chef de mission for this amazing team and with a group of athletes. And it's really a privilege that I'm able to be with them, especially celebrating somebody like Zakia with their success.
And can you tell us about some of the other athletes on the team in addition to Zakia? Kind of what are the profiles? What other countries do people come from?
Yeah, so we have 8 athletes in total, and we have 2 guide runners, and we have 6 sports, and that's table tennis, wheelchair fencing, para taekwondo, para powerlifting, para athletics, and para triathlon. They are all residing in Europe, and they come from Asia and Africa mostly. And ultimately, they are in this situation because they are fleeing their home countries due to either some difficulties with some of their positions that they hold or war situations. But in this case, they are very happy to come here and showcase what they can do, which is sport. And even though the important story is their situation where they come from, they ultimately want to be viewed as elite sports people, and this is something that they, like Zakia, has shown that they actually can compete and win a medal at the Games.
And I know Zakia, competed as part of the refugee team, but really wants to compete as part of the French team, which is where she lives now. Is that sort of the goal for many of these athletes, that they sort of maybe start on the refugee team and then eventually move on to an adopted country?
Yeah, so for the International Paralympic Committee, this is more of a transitional opportunity, if we can put it that way, because ultimately the hope is that the countries where they reside, they would at some point be able to become citizens and be able to at least be considered for competing on behalf of those countries.
And what's the energy like on the team? Because people do come from all different countries, so is there kind of a common language, a common culture? What's that like?
It's interesting because we have multiple languages in the team, and we almost have to have interpretation every time we have a group conversation. But I can tell you that with technology, but also just the athletes and the coaches and the rest of the support staff, that has not been a barrier at all. So everybody has found a way to merge and gel as a team, and the atmosphere is really incredible. You would not think that these are individuals that are coming from different countries. So up to now, really, we don't think of it anymore because the team has really come together, and we are really happy how that has come about.
And I know, despite being ruled by the Taliban, Afghanistan actually has its own delegation at the Paralympics. Is it sort of strange for some of the athletes being on the refugee team, but then maybe having their home country present as well?
I think this is something that they are aware of, because ultimately all the countries where these athletes come from are represented, not just Afghanistan. But this is something that they are aware of, that these teams would come. And by and large, we have not had any issues with any of them or concerns about being anywhere close to delegations from countries where they come from, because in the teams that are here, it's not mostly any issues to do with the individuals that are here. And so far, we have not had any issues on that.
And as we saw at the opening ceremony, the Paralympics as a whole are really a strong message about ability, about inclusion, about sort of overcoming physical limits. Is that a message that resonates even more when it's athletes who are refugees?
Absolutely. And I mean, if you look at the International Paralympic Committee's vision of making it for an inclusive world through parasport, this group of athletes ordinarily would not have this opportunity to be competing at the Games. So actually, this is a good example of how the IPC is trying to make sure that this opportunity is available. And hopefully what the world can see, particularly with when the athletes succeed, is that, first of all, they deserve to be here. But perhaps at a local level, we can all ask ourselves, what can we do to make sure that they have the same opportunities that every other person has, not just in sport, but broadly speaking as active members of the communities where they are living in.
And I know many of the athletes, like Zakia, were born with whatever disability they have. Are there others who perhaps were injured in war or other difficult situations?
Yes, I think we have a few examples of athletes that at some point acquired their disability. I know for sure one of our athletes, Ibrahim, it happened when he was trying to rescue a friend in his home country. So that is one clear case. But by and large, like I said, these are athletes at this stage which their circumstances, while important, they have embraced who they are, including living with the disabilities that they have. And they are really doing well in making sure that they look forward and be able to showcase their best at the Games.
And the refugee team is quite young. I mean, it's only existed since 2016. You only have 8 players represented, or 8 athletes represented this year. Just briefly, kind of what are your hopes and goals for the future of the Refugee Paralympic team?
Well, I think over the 3 editions since the first one was competing in Rio, the numbers have grown. So ordinarily, the expectation would be that with the over 120 million displaced people around the world, such an opportunity would become a little bit more athletes in it. But again, this is something that, like I said, from the 2 that we started in Rio to the 6 that were in Tokyo, now with 8 and 2 guide runners, the goal would be that we provide this opportunity again, and hopefully we can have a few more athletes in the team.
Well, we are definitely rooting for you and for all of your athletes on the Refugee Paralympic team. Thank you again so much for coming in. That's wheelchair tennis player Nyasha Mharakurwa, the mission chief of the Refugee Paralympic team, competing here in Paris.